Alright, welcome again to another Martin's Top 10 list. This week we're talking about my top 10 favorite TV shows. There are no rules to this one, it has to be a TV show, meaning it has to be episodic in some way, shape, or form. Miniseries isn't going to count, but there aren't any of those on there anyway, so we're not going to worry about that. So let's get straight into this with our honorable mention, Clerks, the animated series. It only ran 6 episodes, so it is the shortest series on this entire list. But I've always loved the 6 episodes. It brings back the entire original voice cast of Kevin Smith's film. Kevin Smith helped write it, and it's a really good time. It's one of those things, had they made it maybe 5 years later and on a different network, it probably would have been huge. It would have done way better, but it was aired on ABC, so they didn't let it be anything other than a normal adult situation comedy. And even then, they kind of knocked the legs out of it a little bit. Number 10, The West Wing. I was not introduced to this show until it was over, but it was great. I loved watching it. I still love watching it. And this is one of those shows that often when I go, all right, I'm done with what I'm watching, I'm going to pick a new show. It's always like, maybe I should rewatch The West Wing. That's why I got on this list, because I keep constantly going, I want to watch this, I want to watch this. Even though every episode's 45 minutes long, and there are 6 seasons running 20-something episodes each season, so it takes a considerable amount of time to watch this show. But it's a good show. It's worth the effort, it's worth the time. Basically, in a nutshell, it follows the president and his staff around as they go through his presidency. It starts in his 2nd year. Eventually he runs for re-election, and the last season follows not only the president as he's finishing up his term in office, but also the campaign of the 2 frontrunners who are trying to replace him. It's a great show. Check it out if you haven't. It's worth watching. Number 9, The Critic. I've always loved The Critic. John Lovitz is the voice of The Critic. This aired on both ABC, then ABC canceled it after a season, and Fox picked it up for a season. So it ran a total of 2 seasons on 2 different networks. But basically, the show follows a New York film critic named Jay Sherman as he hosts his own television show called Coming Attractions, and goes through his daily life with his son and his girlfriend and his crazy boss, who's kind of like Ted Turner, but obviously not Ted Turner for legal reasons. But he's a Southern man who owns a multinational empire of television, sports teams, and a chain of Southern-style chicken restaurants. Because, why not? It's a great show. It also has amazing clips in it of fake movie trailers that they put together, mocking the movies of the time. Obviously, it doesn't hold up as great over time because it's talking about trailers that happened back when this came out in the early 90s, but there are still some really funny moments. It's a great show, and it's worth checking out. Number 8, Batman, the animated series. I love Batman. I love his animated series. It's a great show. It technically only ran 4 seasons, I believe, with the first season being excruciatingly long. I think the first season's like 80 episodes or something like that. It's a really long first season, and then more normal-sized other seasons. But they did that a lot with animated shows back in the 90s to get them up to syndication numbers. Basically, it's Batman animated. It's each episode, Batman fights at least one of his villains, and then the next episode, Batman fights another villain. It's great. It has some great storytelling elements. It brings us how we look at Mr. Freeze today. It introduced us to the character of Harley Quinn, who maybe, and I'm sure I'll get yelled at for this by somebody who watches this, maybe she's a little overrated and overused nowadays, but it still gave us to her, and she is an interesting character. It is a great show, and it's a great interpretation of Batman. Number 7, Arrested Development. This is one of the few shows on this list that's technically still being made. Netflix still occasionally puts out a new season. It's still a good show, but really those first 3 seasons that aired on Fox were great. Basically, it's about a rich family whose father, their patriarch, gets thrown in jail for working with Saddam. He gets thrown in jail for working with Saddam. And the entire family, the accounts are all frozen, everything is stopped, and the one son, the middle child, is left trying to hold everything together because he's the actual sensible one who actually wants to try to move on and figure out how you live life after you lose everything instead of trying to hold on to what you had before. One of his brothers wants to be a magician, but he's a bad magician. One of his brothers is a mama's boy who's just connected to her at all times, and his twin sister is kind of the flighty one who really tries to be an activist to get back at their mom, who's the overbearing matriarch of the family, but she tries to get back at her by being an activist, except she actually doesn't care about anything. And then you have their children and her husband, they're all great characters. It is a great show. Number 6, Parks and Recreation. I love this show. It's about the Parks and Recreations Department of a small town government in Pawnee, Indiana. They keep saying it's a small town, but this is kind of a big, small town. But I feel that way about any small town. In any TV show, it's not really ever a small town, because it almost always has its own hospital. And how many small towns have their own hospital? But I live in a small town and there's no hospital here. Side point, back to the show. It's a really fun show. It boasts a strong cast. It has a very similar style to The Office, as it was kind of made as a sister show to The Office. But I always have preferred Parks and Recreation more. I watched it, and I just really wanted to keep going with it and keep watching it. And then, the season would end, and I'd be like, I want more Parks and Recreation. And now it's all the way done, but it is a great show. It is worth watching. Amy Poehler, Audrey Plaza, they do tremendous, amazing performances in this show, as is the rest of the cast. It is a good time, and you should really check out Parks and Rec. Number 5, Fargo. This is the FX series that has been running off and on for the last couple of years. This is slightly different than most of the other shows on this list, as it's not totally episodic, as each season is its own story. Although, unlike a lot of these other shows that are out there that do this same thing, this is far more interconnected than most of those other shows are, where they might have one random reference to a previous season out here. This one is just literally, it's all woven together. It's actually a sequel to the movie. So the movie basically acts as season 0, and then elements of that flow into this. The seasons jump around time. The first season is set in 2006. The next season jumps back to the 80s. And the last season that aired takes place in 2010, and they are working on a 4th season, which is going to go back to the 1950s. But they're interconnected stories through people, through ideas. Obviously, the people end up being older in the newer series and younger in the older ones. And it all takes place in the Midwest during the winter, because nothing screams Midwest than everything being covered in snow. So much snow. Number 4, News Radio. I've loved this show since I was a kid, when it was actually on and new. Basically, it's a workplace comedy, much like Parks and Recreation, but it looks at a workplace of a New York news radio station, a completely AM station that does news, weather, and sports. News, weather, and sports. And this looks at their madcap adventures as they get a new station manager, played by Dave Foley of the Kids in the Hall of Fame, who is fresh out of college from Wisconsin. So you gotta love that. They made their main character from Wisconsin, because coming from Wisconsin definitely makes you a rube in everything that you do, except superior to everyone else. That's what I've learned from TV and movies. He gets thrust into this New York life where the station owner, played by Stephen Root, is way more hands-on of a station owner than anyone should ever be, but he's also an eccentric billionaire. So he's hands-on in the sense that he likes to hang out and just be there and be a part of what's going on, not really being, I'm the boss, just sometimes actually adding fuel to whatever fire is going on. You get a tremendous performance by Phil Hartman. This is the show he was working on when he passed. He did do 4 of the 5 seasons of this show, and he plays one of the on-air talents he is just phenomenal in this show. And it's just a really strong cast. I've always enjoyed this show, and I always enjoy going back and watching it. Number 3, Oz. I mentioned earlier with The West Wing that every time I look at a new show to watch, I go, oh, maybe I should watch The West Wing. That's after I go, man, I should rewatch Oz. So Oz was an HBO show that ran in the early 90s, Before HBO really started getting into television, when it was just mainly a movie station, this was one of its first television shows, along with stuff like Sex and the City, Arliss, and I think The Red Shoe Diaries is in there as well. Oz takes place entirely in the Oswald Correctional Facility, which is a maximum security prison. They never say what state it's in, so I can't give you that information. And it looks at various lives of inmates, both inside of what is called Emerald City, which is an experimental unit, and outside in the general population. There are very few characters that are just from the Gen Pop. Most of them are in M City at some point in the run of the show, though there is one played by J.K. Simmons who spends the first season in M City and then every other season and the remaining 5 seasons in Gen Pop, because he is the main antagonist of the show and a giant a-hole. He's also a white supremacist, so he kind of deserves being an a-hole. But it's a great show. It has some great storytelling. Each season is only 8 episodes, so it's not that time-consuming of a show to sit down and watch. I do have to admit, if you do decide to watch the show, give it a couple of episodes before you give up on it, because it does take a couple of episodes to really get in to the groove that the show has for the rest of each season, with how it's going to tell stories and how it's going to present these characters. But it is really great storytelling, and I've always loved Oz, and I will always love rewatching it. Number 2, Superstore. It's the only show on this list that is 100% still being aired. If you tune in to NBC on a Thursday night at 7 o'clock, you'll probably catch an episode of Superstore. It's a workplace comedy, because workplace comedies are amazing. Everyone loves a good workplace comedy. If you don't love a good workplace comedy, you don't watch the right workplace comedies. Anyways, it takes place in a superstore. Something like Sam's Club, Walmart, Kmart, Target. I don't know why I said Kmart, because Kmart's not a thing anymore. But, moving on, it takes place in the superstore, and it's the employees dealing with their day-to-day lives, dealing with management, dealing with customers, and dealing with each other. It is just a fantastic show that is worth watching. Right now, they're on season 5, so go out, watch the other 4 seasons. They're all on Hulu. And just really enjoy it and laugh at it and just feel that experience, because if you've ever been in one of these stores, either as an employee or a customer, you'll probably relate to something in this show. So that brings us to number 1, Community. I love this show. This show is one that drags you in and keeps you. It is hilarious. It takes place at Greendale Community College, which is the worst community college in its area, and there are 2 of them in its area. So, it's not even the best community college in its community. And it looks at a Spanish study group. Well, they're a Spanish study group in the first season. The logistics of the group change each season, but it's always the same group of people who range in diversity. They also have a character, the dean is a regular character on the show, and their Spanish teacher, who becomes a student, who then becomes a security guard, who then becomes the emperor of the school, who then becomes a guy faking amnesia, who then becomes a teacher again, who I think is still a teacher in that final season. It's really weird what they do with Ken Jeong is the actor who plays him, his character, but he is hilarious in this show. It's an over-the-top comedy where they're not trying to really stay in the realm of reality, but they try at the same time. They'll go that little extra mile, like having a room filled with Frisbees inside the college. Why any college would have a room filled with Frisbees is beyond me, but they have one in Greendale. Greendale also does not have a strict kind of structure as to where things are in the school, as it sometimes looks like everything is basically just in the library building, and you can get to everything in there. They have lockers, which is just weird for a college. But it's a great show. It is hilarious, and if you've never sat down and watched Community, do it. I cannot say how much I love this show. It grew on me when I started watching it. I have introduced as many of my friends as I can to this show so they can enjoy Community, and it is a hilarious show that deserves a movie, as there's a common hashtag, 6 seasons and a movie. It got its 6 seasons, now we want our movie. Alright, well, this is my top 10 favorite TV shows. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave me some comments on what you think some of your favorite TV shows that maybe I want to check out. Or if you have some other suggestions for top 10 lists, hit me up. Don't forget to subscribe so I know people actually like this. And have a good one. Later.